Hello everyone, hey, it's Dayu here from EcommOps. Um, so we're starting out this second webinar about Trump tariffs and impact on DTC shipping from China. Just to make sure that the technology is working, can someone pull up the chat and just confirm that you can see and hear me okay, and that you can see this Google Doc here? Someone, anyone? Okay, there you go. Hey Julian, how's it going? Hey Robin, how are you guys doing? All right, so I do advise you guys actually keep chat open here. I'm keeping an eye on the chat, and please use the chat feature to ask any questions as I go live. Now, I'm looking at the attendees on this list, and actually, some of you guys, actually quite a few of you guys actually attended the first one, and I recognize a lot of our clients in here, so I'm going to assume that most of you might have been following me already over the last couple weeks, and potentially even watched the previous webinar as well. So I do see Gerard Ecom raising your hand. So we're not going to use that feature for now, whatever that means exactly. So if you have any questions or comments, please use the chat, the Zoom chat. So anyways, I'm gonna assume that most of you guys have been following and may have even watched the previous recording from April 17th. So if you haven't already, I included the YouTube video on that in this document, and we'll share this document as well. So I'm not going to spend too much time going through this entire document, okay? Last time I spent roughly an hour going through all of this stuff, and the last 30 minutes was a really active Q&A session, which I thought was very valuable. So this time around, I'm going to assume that most of you are going to be already on top of the information that I had in the last past weeks. I do encourage you that if you don't have all the context, do check out the YouTube recording from the previous webinar. Okay, and I'm gonna try to like kind of go through some of the main points in the next 20-30 minutes or so, and try to get to a more active Q&A session, so that you guys have as much time as you as possible to ask me any questions. But while I'm going through things, please do put any questions you have in the chat, and especially if it's more relevant to a section that I'm going through. And I'll try to address it as we go, or when it's relevant. Okay. So a couple of just like really important housekeeping things. First of all, I'm not gonna keep this document updated. um, I have done something like that before. However, the news has been moving so quickly that just assume that this document, when you get it, it's going to be just a document that's stuck in time. Okay, so I'm not going to keep this updated. I do have the link to the previous webinar, and then certain sections you actually do see links where we actually identify where I actually went through these sections in detail in the previous webinar video. So again, I'm going to breeze through. I'm gonna breeze through most of this stuff. But if you want to have more details after you get this document, please do check out the relevant timestamp in the document itself, or sorry, in the previous webinar YouTube itself. Okay. So again, breezing through. I'm Dayu. I run EcommOps. I have a lot of experience at ecom before. I was featured on Shark Tank before. I ran my own dropshipping store for a while. Not my proudest moment. And right now I run a beauty brand as well on the side, as well as my main job, which is running EcommOps. And I see a lot of clients here, so obviously we've been working together for a while. I have a lot of traditional background as well. I have an econ degree, economics degree from Stanford, MBA from Wharton. I used to be a product manager before. I used to consult for Fortune 500 retail companies. So the point is, like, I know what I'm talking about beyond just e-commerce itself. And there's going to be some points here that's more talking about economics, trade policies, and I do actually have a background there, so I do know what I'm talking about. And then now I'm running EcommOps. So I started EcommOps 6-7 years ago, and it's at the time we were more serving dropshippers who wanted something better, but now we really evolved into how do we service Western brands, Western operator brands to access D2C fulfillment from China done in the right way. Okay, and today we ship tens of thousands of orders every single day from China. Most of those, over 60% goes to the U.S. and the rest to global markets outside of China. So, I mean, there is a very important impact for most of you listening to this, especially if you work with EcommOps, especially if you're shipping to the US. Now, one very important point to understand is we serve real brands. Okay, so there's definitely a lot of concerns around Chinese operated sellers kind of flooding the markets or kind of taking advantage of tariff loopholes, especially as the tariffs go up. That's not what we do. Okay, so we do not serve, actually, we have zero Chinese clients. For those who don't know, by the way, I'm actually an American citizen. I was born in China. I'm proud to be Chinese, but actually, I actually pay U.S. taxes. Okay, and the vast majority of our clients, they are actually Western brands, like not Chinese sellers selling cheap products and using gray or black hat tactics. And this is not what EcommOps stands for. And I don't think that for the audience here, this is what you stand for either. All of you guys here, I think if you're listening in here, is that you're building good businesses, you're scaling in responsible ways, and you're trying to build something sustainable and trying to maintain something that's sustainable. And we actually have a quick view of our clients by country or region. So actually, our biggest single country where clients are from is the US. So Europe total is larger than that, but obviously that includes a lot of other countries as well. But the country where our clients are most based out of is actually the US. And the customers that they serve, that we ship to, are mostly in the US as well. So, I mean, the reason why I care about this so much, and you should care about this so much, is because this affects you, right? As a Western operator brand, you might have a U.S. entity where you're European, and you know, this is not just about Chinese factories, Chinese sellers trying to flood the market with cheap products. That does happen. Okay, it is a real issue, but just throughout the years, EcommOps and EcommOps clients have really just competed against that as opposed to standing for that kind of model. And because of that, this is why it's so important for for everyone here to understand the nuances of these tariffs, and more specifically, how can you continue to operate in a, and this is important, in a compliant way. Okay, at the very least, not bringing on undue legal risk to your business, especially if you have a U.S. entity. Okay, and then you know the other thing I want to say is that like what you're doing, what our clients are doing, you're actually benefiting local customers. You are actually bringing good quality products at relatively reasonable prices to customers in markets that may not have access to those kind of products. Like most of you guys listening here, like you're not just a generic, cheap, simple drop shipper. I mean, those days are over. You know what I mean? Like, look, I drop ship like 7 years ago, like those golden ages where you could just like use AliExpress, steal their ads essentially, and just like you know start scaling up. Like those days are over already. Okay, and at least the clients that EcommOps serve, like you're beyond that already. Like you are actually building something more custom, building a long-term brand that is sustainable and deserves to be sustainable because you are actually doing something that's different than what traditional Chinese sellers are doing and therefore actually benefiting the market and, you know, paying your taxes as well to maybe not the US, but like European taxes or like somewhere else other than China. Okay? So this is why it really matters to you and really matters to us, and but compliance, we'll get to that detail later. This is really really important for you to remember is do not bring undue risks to your business by doing things that are potentially or literally illegal. All right, so and you know just briefly about our team as well, and a bunch of you are in this webinar as well, is we're not all Chinese, right? We have Chinese team members, but especially the client team is based all around the world. And, you know, we have a lot of Western influence and backgrounds as well. So we really kind of cross that in between where we obviously operate, you know, what we think is a very efficient direct from China fulfillment service, but we also have a deep understanding of Western brands and Western businesses and your needs as well. All right, so The most recent situation, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I do encourage you to actually go through and understand these formal White House executive orders or fact sheets because this is the actual real data. All right. So, first, this one here, so this first one here is where it does actually talk about like the actual tariffs from China into the US. And this was something that really kind of confused a lot of folks out there. It's like up to 245%. But the sub point is 125% reciprocal tariffs, 20% to address the fentanyl crisis in Section 301 tariffs on specific goods between 7.5 and 100%. Now, very, very important. This is not all. So this doesn't actually include the general duties, base duties that some products already have on top of this. Okay, so this is where it's kind of confusing. It's not 245%, but it's also not up to 245% because you're going to have some products that have all of this and you have 100% Section 305 plus some percentage of general duty as well. So just keep that in mind. And then the other fact sheet that's very important is this updated fact sheet on the de minimis elimination. So actually this specific is just an update on that, but I think by now everyone knows that May 2nd is when de minimis is supposed to be eliminated for China, so the $800 de minimis exemption. Now, when we say May 2nd, technically we mean like today or tomorrow because May 2nd is when that is eliminated potentially, or at least announced to be eliminated as goods cross US borders. And it takes time to like actually get to US customs. So we'll go to that detail later, but basically like starting today, like tomorrow, you should not be, or you cannot be utilizing the standard shipping lines anymore that use the standard customs declaration that was dependent on the de minimis exemption. Okay, and now this previous update talked about, and to be very clear, this entire section is talking about postal services. So that's e-packet. Okay, so not Union Express, not Yangwen, for example. And this is where, for example, like postal services, so like e-packet, you're actually just paying like 100% or 20% or like $100 of fees. So anyways, do not use ePacket anymore until something changes about this. All right, so moving on. So I did talk about the whole timeline of events. So if you want to go through that, make sure to check that part of the video, but I won't go through all of it again. I'll just talk about a little bit more of the recent news. Actually, over the last week or so, there was actually not that much like real changes in the tariff policy. So there was an interesting couple of days, all right? So like 2 days ago, Trump was apparently going to slash tariffs and that he's not going to play hardball with China. And there were some White House statements saying that maybe the tariffs are reduced to like 50-60%. And that caused, first of all, a stock market rally and a lot of excitement in the industry thinking that he's going to back down. Not gonna happen. I didn't expect it was gonna happen, by the way. And then just like today, as in like, well, April 23rd, I'm in Asia right now, so like, just the end of the day, April 23rd, essentially he just made a clarification that he's still waiting for China to come to the table to progress any negotiations for a deal. So, and China is not really doing that. Okay, so like China is not actually coming to the table and aggressively negotiating. And we won't go into all those details there, but basically the strategy from what we understand is that China has really no specific need to aggressively negotiate, particularly given all of the past experiences where Trump has negotiated with either a country or a business and the deal just didn't, I mean, it just never really came to a mutually beneficial deal. So China as a government is definitely avoiding that. So when he said this on the 23rd, I just don't think that there's any real near-term sign of anything that's going to significantly change about the tariffs or the de minimis elimination. Okay? Now, if you ask me, I think that by the end of the year, something's going to have to change because of the tremendous impact, negative impact is going to have on the US economy, on the world economy, which we'll go through a little bit later. But I don't think anything's going to happen tomorrow. Anything's going to happen like in the next week. And this is obviously a critical period for de minimis elimination for DTC shipping from China to the US. All right, so I did go over a lot of the key concepts, like what's a tariff and what's a trade deficit. Basically, like it just didn't make sense. But please watch the previous video if you want more context on that. I'm gonna skip through most of this stuff. Um, who does it really hurt? Okay, so I mean, these tariffs actually hurt you. These tariffs hurt Western operator brands as well as Chinese operator brands, but they also hurt Western operator brands who actually are honest and want to actually bring good quality products to US or I mean just local US customers. Okay, there's a huge question on the legality of what Trump is doing here. So, brief summary here is that Congress is supposed to be the one that actually confirms tariffs, except when there's an emergency. And this is the power that Trump has been using recently. So, I mean, I get asked sometimes, like, why is there always an emergency, right? There was a fentanyl emergency, there was the trade deficit emergency, and this is exactly why. Because Trump is actually using that power, and many say illegally, to claim that these are emergencies that he can actually just change tariffs on the whim without Congress approval. And there are increasing lawsuits that's happening right now. Entrepreneurs are suing over tariffs, and U.S. businesses are suing to block tariffs. And actually, this was just something that I just like that just came out. U.S. states, okay, American states are starting to sue to halt Trump's tariffs as well. So there is a lot of indication that there is increasing government pressure within the U.S. to stop, at least roll back the power that he has right now. Now the problem is though, like that takes a while. The legal systems, especially in the U.S., just takes time. So even if this comes to a positive conclusion for U.S. and China tariffs in general, it's not going to come soon enough, and we still have to figure out what do we do over the next couple weeks, couple months before any of this makes any movement. All right. So I'll breeze through some of this stuff as well. Please watch the previous video for more details. But essentially, there is increasing pressure on the U.S. dollar and the increasing pressure on the risk of stagflation as well. So the reason why these two are important is because these are actually the biggest concerns on the U.S. Economic side. So if anything that actually pushes Trump over the edge to start rolling back some of these tariffs, it's going to probably be these. The U.S. dollar devaluating and the risk of stagflation, which basically is the combination of inflation and low economic growth. It's terrible for any kind of economy. And by the way, like stagflation is usually rare, and usually it only really happens when there is a significant supply chain shock, like tariffs, right? Artificial tariffs that just aren't really that. I mean, it's artificial tariffs that create artificial issues in the supply chain. So, okay, so actually, this part I will go over in detail again because this is really important as you understand your shipping line options or freight options, and also remaining compliant or at least eliminating or minimizing the legal risk on your business. Okay, so the importer of record (IOR) is incredibly important to understand for those who don't. So let's use some examples. Okay, so starting with traditional bulk freight to retail. So like H&M, for example. And let's just assume that we're talking about a product that has a $3 factory COGS, okay, that sells for like $30 at H&M. So traditionally, what happens is that H&M would ship a container and formally declare at U.S. Customs, let's just say the duty rate total is 30%. Actually, I made these slides when actually it was 30-something%. So but now it's much higher, but let's assume 30%, okay? 30% duty on $3 factory declared COGS, total import duty paid is 90 cents, plus some fees. okay? And this would be paid by H&M, who is the IOR in this case. So that's a very traditional way of doing things in physical retail. And then the other extreme is a direct model. So I'm talking about like something like DHL Express. So like not Unixpress by the way, but DHL Express, direct, end to end, first mile, last mile, direct to the consumer. So let's take Shein as an example. And by the way, Shein uses DHL Express, or at least they did sometimes. So they sell for something like $30 retail value, and they use something like DHL Express. Okay. Now, technically, the the customer in this case is actually the importer, and technically they're supposed to actually pay whatever duty on the declared retail value. Let's just say $30, and the import duty paid would be 30% of $30, which is $9. Okay, paid by the end customer plus some customs fees as well. Now, when I say technically, is that like practically speaking, like there is some leeway to say what you consider your retail value is in this case, right? Where it doesn't necessarily have to be literally what you sold it on your website, okay? But it has to be some reasonable idea of like some reasonable number for the retail value, and it's not $3. Like you will be questioned to say that, hey, this is obviously like not a $3 product, because the IOR is your end customer. So it has to be retail value as opposed to factory value. Now, what is Unixpress using right now? Like as of, by the way, today, April 24th, and it's gonna pause like tomorrow. But this is like under de minimis exemption. Direct private couriers like Unixpress were using something that's called T86 or similar, depending on the product type. Where basically, like, okay, like let's say you're an EcommOps client, this is your brand, you sell something for $30, and then EcommOps helps you fulfill, we send it to Unixpress, it goes through US Customs, and so here it just doesn't matter because under de minimis exemption, if it's under $800, then it just doesn't matter at all, and it goes through to your customers. Total import duty paid is zero by, I mean, just no one has to pay import duty. Now you have to like pay sales taxes, right? So that's a separate thing, but at least in terms of import duty is zero, and that was the big benefit of the de minimis exemption. All right, now. So currently, there is a DDP solution that Unixpress is offering, and some other couriers are offering as well. Okay, so in the same situation, you sell something for $30, and let's just say you actually like the product itself is a $3 product, factory costs. All right, and then Unixpress on a DDP basis manages that process at customs. So they're responsible here, right? So either they or just their related party is going to be the IOR in this case, the importer record in this case. And then there's technically then zero import duty paid, but there's going to be some kind of DDP surcharge. Okay, and then there's actually some more detailed definitions of the different options here, but DDP is a very important term to understand. Delivery duty paid. That actually means that there's gonna be some higher fee. Okay, and especially with higher tariffs, it might be quite a bit more expensive. We're seeing maybe double the price, or more than that for a similar product shipping like on a DDP line versus a ordinary line. But the idea is that you pay an upfront price for the shipping line, okay? And you're not responsible for additional duties or fees. And then, well, also, you're not also responsible to import the product. And therefore, the compliance risk of that customs process does not fall on you as a company, okay? So that is very important to remember. So there's two reasons why, like understanding this and using something like this is really important. One is just simply like just compliance risk, right? The de minimis exemption has existed for the last like almost 100 years, like 70, 80, 90 years, whatever. So basically during that entire time, like you could just do this. Like it just didn't really matter that there were really no compliance issues because of that exemption. However, after May 2nd, it starts to actually matter. But no one exactly knows what's going to happen exactly at customs. Are there going to be updated compliance codes? There's a possibility de minimis is going to be paused anyways, but let's assume that it's not going to be paused. And therefore, you do not want to get caught in potential legal risk with the US Customs. Okay, and this is one way to shift that technical legal risk from you to whatever provider that you actually use, whether it's a DDP private line, direct line solution, or maybe kind of like some kind of DDP freight as well. Okay. Oh, so Martinez, so you have a question here. What type of entry is UniExpress going to use? T11 versus T01, and what is the difference and why? Okay, so this is something that I can't confidently say we have full details on, because such is the nature of DDP in general, is that whoever is providing these services are not going to tell you all the details either. Okay, because I'll just be honest here, like there is probably some gray area stuff that is actually going on. Okay, so like I will just be honest there, but the point here is that you do not want that risk on your business. You want whoever is providing those options to bear the actual legal responsibility and risk. Now, that's legal responsibility. There's operational risk as well, right? There is a chance that you're using this line and your packages get stuck in customs. Okay, so that's an operational risk, but that's still not legally your problem. You might have to then figure out like how to clear customs then, or get a return, or possibly then you do have to pay a fee if there's some issues there. That I'm not exactly sure, but that's not a legal risk. Now, to answer your specific question, Martinez, so our understanding is that UniExpress is going to use a combination of both. So T01 and T11. So generally, I mean, just a oversimplified view is T01 is just more traditional import processing, right? Whereas T11 is that was actually something. Well, T11 is an option that a lot of couriers were actually considering during the first round of de minimis elimination, and that actually we were actually using for a couple days before that first round of elimination was paused again. The problem with T11 is that technically speaking, if you're using T11 in a B2C method, so actually, when you use T11, essentially it's more like a direct line. So T11 is simplified informal entry for packages that are valued under $2,500, although like that is getting more and more restricted depending on the product type as well, right? And you pay some customs fee, like $2.60 or so, plus you declare your value and pay duties on the entire shipment itself. Okay. Now, previously, T11 was direct to consumer, which means that the IOR is technically to the consumer, and that created an issue. And that still creates an issue with any courier that utilizes T11 directly to your customer, is that technically the IOR is your customer, which means that even though it's technically compliant as an option, you're going to have a risk if you try to declare your value at factory COGS. And of course you want to. I mean, you pay $2 for a product and you charge $30 for a customer. Like obviously you want to declare $2 and not like $30 or somewhere close to $30, right? But technically speaking, that's not compliant using T11 in that B2C method. However, our understanding of what UniExpress is doing is actually they're actually using T11 like to themselves. So they're essentially like importing themselves. So the IRR in this case is actually UniExpress or whoever they're using at customs. And similar to TO1 as well. TO1 is just I mean, TO1 is a lot more traditional. It's for kind of like just larger batches of products, and they're going to be using TO1 for certain products that just have a lot of volume that actually makes sense for them to declare in a significant batch, and under the same HTS code, right? However, there's so much variety in the types of products that go through with all different HTS codes. And by the way, like you definitely do not want to fudge your HTS codes in this case, where this is why like for a lot of other products, they will be using T11. However, the distinction is that the IOR is not going to be the end customer, but it's going to be UniExpress or whoever business entity that they have here. All right, question from Gerard. Being UniExpress, the IOR post May 2nd, is UniExpress providing invoices which the HTS code used and the declared value shown, so we merchants know everything is happening the right way, but above all else, in case of an audit, since we are liable for penalties and fees, if any. So that was part of my point around right now, okay, and I emphasize, right now, by the current understanding of the customs code, is that the IOR is what's important here in terms of liability, okay? So the nature of DDP shipping in general is that you're not going to get a formal declaration. You're not going to get a formal customs invoice. Like that's not how DDP works. Like you do that if you're traditionally importing, or even like using T11 but importing to yourself. For example, if you are the actual IOR or you're a related entity that you work with directly. Okay, so to answer your question, no, we don't believe that UniExpress is going to provide invoices on the custom declaration, and that's usually not standard for any kind of DDP method in general. Okay, and the question of what happens in terms of an audit, and I mean the specific question is what happens in terms of an audit since we are liable for penalties and fines, if any. So by we, Gerard means like, okay, the brand may be liable for any penalties and fines, but that's the point. If you are not the importer, if it's not your brand actually managing this process, then you do not have that legal liability for any penalties or fees. Now, again, legal liability. It is very possible that this method is going to come under scrutiny and there are going to be issues at customs. However, whoever is in the middle here, they're going to be legally liable. But they might tell you, well, hey, look, your packages are stuck, and if you don't pay us like 10% more, then we have to return your package, right? So there is that risk. And by the way, this is why we do not suggest using this line now. We do not suggest using any DDP lines for the time being until the situation is a lot more clear, because there is just uncertainty. Like no one can tell you exactly, like, that you're completely safe from even compliant, like legal risks. I feel pretty confident right now to say that because you as a brand using this method is not the IOR, that you should be safe. Okay, but that's now. Customs codes can always change, especially because there is increasing scrutiny on all sorts of shipments under declaration, kind of any kind of shady methods going through right now. So what is uncertain now may be more certain soon enough, but that certainty may not be in your favor. There is, I think, a real strong possibility that U.S. Customs, the U.S. government starts to go beyond the reach of the IOR and beyond the reach of your DDP provider in terms of legal liability. It's not happening yet, okay? So don't worry about it now, but I just, it is a possibility, right? Especially if more and more people are using this kind of line. All right, so anyways, moving on, I mean, there's some definitions of the different types of lines. I think that one thing that we didn't just go over is just e-packet, international postal. Like don't use e-packet right now. It's like international postal services are the most sensitive right now because I expect that they have no idea what to do once the packages actually hit customs. And any packages that you send out right now or even last week, they are going to hit customs on May 2nd or after. Okay. And then if you have any questions on like HTS codes, I went through like a pretty deep dive on how to actually check your HTS codes, how do you actually add up all your general duties plus section 301 plus the other tariffs. There's 2 links here, but definitely watch the video here, and yeah, like really figure out what your total tariffs actually are, And here's just kind of two examples of different HTS codes where you add up all of these, including the base tariff, by the way, which the fact sheet didn't really mention, but all the other tariffs that they mentioned adding up to like 150 something percent for office supplies, 181% for wovens for women's trousers, and some products are going to be over 245%. Like I'm pretty sure stuff like EVs, for example, or anything with very specific high general duties or high tariffs to start with, it might actually go over 245%. But certainly that's not going to be consumer goods that I assume that our employees are selling or our clients are selling. All right, so I don't love doing this, but like just check my Twitter actually for the most up to date information on the impacts on direct courier lines. Just things are moving so fast these days that at least probably for the next week or two, just always check what my just I'm gonna pin the most recent update, all the details specifically on how it actually impacts D2C shipping. Okay, so from the last update, and I'll probably make an update tomorrow. There's nothing really new beyond this. Is so Unexpress, 4PX, and Yanwen have announced different forms of solutions. So let's start with Unexpress first, right? So Unexpress, that was the one that actually we kind of went over in more detail already, and now there's still a concern on like how operationally efficient, how compliant this actually is. So this is working right now. So this line is actually working, but it just hasn't been tested at scale. I mean, no one needed to use this DDP line. No one needed to pay more just for it not to matter, because the standard lines, as of right now, are still working, but they are going to be paused tomorrow. Now, Yanwen, okay, let's talk about Yanwen first. So Yanwen, the good news in Yanwen is that like they actually have announced a DDP parcel line that does support electronics and cosmetics products. Okay, so this was actually the big gap that Unexpress didn't actually offer. It's very expensive though. Like for like a 500 gram parcel, it would be like at least 120% higher than standard prices. Um, so and by the way, this is like shipping prices, okay? This is not your factory COGS. So depending on your factory COGS, depending on your weight, like the net cost of this could potentially be like just far higher if you actually just declared your factory COGS, right? So I mean, I don't believe that this is a really efficient option, but obviously, and yes, Julian. So Yanwen line for battery products is ready. So yes, it is ready. We haven't been using it, and again, I do not recommend you guys use these lines yet because they're untested. They're untested at scale, and no one knows exactly, right? And I'll talk about the precise risk after I go through 4PX. Okay, so 4PX is interesting. 4PX is not offering a DDP line. And now they're not clear what they're using, okay? But they have this idea of like a customs duty, a fixed 160% based on declared value, that they're saying that we could declare like as low as or at least $2 declared value. So this, like the 4PX option, I don't believe is an option. I think this is the riskiest, both in terms of will it clear customs, but also compliance risk as well. Because from our understanding is that this is not really a DDP line in the same way where they're the IOR. From our understanding, the customer is going to be the IOR in this case. And that directly comes with a big question of, well, like what's going to happen if you try to declare a bunch of packages at $2? And but it's clearly going to the end customer who's the IOR. During the couple of days of when de minimis was eliminated after Chinese New Year's, and everyone was testing out the T11 method, like everyone was trying to declare like $5 or like less, right? And we already had information that there was concerns from customs, like why are there all these $5 packages? Now nothing happened then because Trump then paused it, right? But we had some early suspicions from the data that that was going to be problematic, declaring a low declared value, right? And look, here's the thing, like it's not about under declaring. Like that's not what we're trying to do here. And like this is something that I think a lot of like just black hat methods or like Chinese sellers they're actually trying to do. They're trying to under declare even their factory cogs. Okay, don't do that. There's been increasing audits, especially for traditional imports, on just under declaring, right? So don't do that. However, if your factory costs are $2, like I think it's fair that you declare $2 through this method as opposed to $20, $30, whatever you're selling at. Okay. However, from our understanding of the 4PX method or any kind of D2C method or B2C method that goes directly to the customer, like even using something like T11, I think it's a significant risk that you're trying to declare a low value or factory COGS value. And it's an unknown risk, but you know, this is why we're also very, very not confident about the 4PX solution. Okay. Um, yeah, so, okay. So right now it is April 24th, 3:40 p.m. or actually 4:40 p.m. China time. Sorry. Oh, so Martinez has an interesting question. So isn't it that all those DDP methods are all about under declaring? I don't know. I mean, hey, look, no one exactly knows, right? And if you ask any kind of DDP provider, they're not going to tell you, or you probably shouldn't trust exactly what they're telling you, right? Look, I mean, you know, that is the nature of DDP, right? But that's my point, is that the compliance risk is not on you. The compliance risk is on that DDP provider. Now, you have to use the right DDP option, okay? Like, if you use a DDP option that then just like uses you or your U.S. entity as an IOR, right? Then like try to avoid that, right? And you know this is actually why like we're really kind of cautious of any option where the IOR is either the customer or potentially the brand operator, right? Now from a brand compliance risk is okay. Look, this large service provider, this large logistics company, someone like Express or any kind of DDP freight provider, this is a service they're offering me. Okay, and you're using it, and it's more expensive than if you just like. I mean, it is generally more expensive, but maybe more efficient than if you declared, you know, full value. But that's just service you're paying for, and the risk is actually on them. Okay, so you know that's the point. All right, so Gerard, sorry, I don't understand the declared value thing. Isn't that in the USA, declared value is based on FOB COGS? I'm lost when you mentioned do not declare $2 even if it's $2 to avoid scrutiny and be forced to declare $20. Okay, so very important for us to get that clear. Declared value is not based on FOB COGS, not always. It depends on who's actually importing. Okay, so it when you're talking about using this other extreme, right? If you're using a direct shipping method where like let's just say you're an actual customer, okay, you're an actual customer and you buy something from and again this is something like using like something like DHL Express where the IOR is actually you as a customer, then technically you're importing that product directly to you. So technically if you paid $30, then it should be based on that retail value. Now, there's like ways to like under declare, right? Because okay, just because the price is $30, like maybe the retail value is technically $20 or $15. Like I mean, there is some leeway there, right? However, it's not the factory COGS because you're not buying directly from the factory. I mean, just that's the legal concept of the IRR in this case, right? But this is why something like this is so important, where because the DDP provider or UniExpress is operating that customs clearing process, and someone on their side is the IOR. What they're essentially doing is that they're importing into themselves. So they're importing to the US first, and that's why it's legitimate to declare on the factory value, right? And then it goes on directly to your customers. Okay? So yeah, and again, this is why understanding who the IOR is for your different options is very critical. Now, I will be very, very honest right now, is that all of this might change. Okay? Because as you look at this you utilizing this method sounds like kind of a loophole, right? It is a loophole. But it's legitimate, right? Like I mean, like it works because this is how the customs laws actually work. And there's a gap in specific laws that prevent this. That might change. That might change like next week. Okay, so like just be aware that this is something that is currently legitimate, but that may not be legitimate going forward. And this is something, or I mean, or maybe May 2nd, May 3rd comes along, and even though de minimis is eliminated, like we realize, or customs realize this is totally fine, and there's no like new customs updates, and it's totally legitimate, and then we feel a lot more confident that this is actually a legitimate method that's not actually raising any flags. Okay. Um, yeah. So Martinez mentioned something about the right of the first sale. Um, so yeah, okay. So Martinez and okay, uh, the first sale rule is very complicated, but it does have to do with in especially like what our clients do, kind of like this kind of method, especially in this case, like where the first sale and then the next and so it's a little bit overcomplicated, I think, Martinez, for me to explain right now because the first sale rule just it didn't matter at all when de minimis is still exempt. So no one exactly knows how that exactly is going to apply, especially in a case like this. But that is exactly why there like I even have a concern around well, who's the seller in this case? Like, yes, like we're trying to figure out who's not the IOR, who's not the importer, but like, who's the seller, and there like who's the buyer, right? So this is where there is currently a question mark, and there exists to be a loophole, but who knows if it still continues to be, um, or if it might actually be addressed. And okay, so when I say loophole, don't think of it as something that's illegal, right? Technically speaking, de minimis exemption is a loophole that we all take advantage of, right? I mean, like, why is it that anything under $800 can just go duty free? Now, the reason why, by the way, is because of resources. Is because customs did not find it to be cost efficient to scrutinize every single package that was under $800. And that's still the case, by the way. Like, there's actually plenty of analysis showing that if and when de minimis is actually eliminated, the U.S. Customs would actually lose money because it would just take so much time and resources to scrutinize every package and not make it back in enough duty. All right. So de minimis exemption existed as a legal loophole for direct shipping, and currently there are some legal loopholes that still exist. And part of my point is like understand them and utilize them in an efficient but compliant way, at least in terms of legal risk to your business. All right. Okay. So question from Filippo. Unexpress DDP line, what tools would you recommend for calculating the DDP surcharge we're currently facing? So Unexpress has not actually released its most up-to-date DDP rates yet. It should be like today or tomorrow, but it has not released the updated details yet. So just I'll definitely update on my Twitter once you have those details, and any EcommOps clients, you'll get those rates as soon as we get them and get them in our systems as well. However, the second part of your question was, can we use the HTS like the HTS tool to estimate the DDP surcharge? So this is something that is very important. Is if you're using DDP, there's just going to be a surcharge. Okay, as in like some kind of flat fee or kind of fee on top of the shipping rates, but that's separate from the duty. So actually, if you're using DDP, you're not actually like you don't actually need to figure out your formal declaration based on HTS code and your fees because that's just included in the DDP surcharge itself. Now, there are actually certain options out there that have some kind of combination. right? Like depending on the product itself, the DDP options might be actually more expensive, or you actually do have to pay, some fee on top of that. I mean, just like because there's so much variation in the types of products, the HTS codes, and the tariffs. I mean, kind of even using this example of the two, where is that? Even using the example of the two HTS codes, um, there uh, there is going to be a difference, right? So especially as things stabilize and de minimis is actually eliminated, and maybe there's more options in terms of formal DDP lines, we do expect that some couriers are probably going to have different levels of DDP lines for different products that might have different fees as well, that are very related likely to the specific tariffs on that type of product. However, the nature of DDP is that you do not have to calculate or do not add formal duties on top of that. Okay. All right. So anyways, in terms of, so I am going to go through some recommendations, but now is definitely a time that I do encourage any attendees to continue to ask questions. All right. So right now it is April 24th, almost 5 p.m. China time. So April 25th, 9 a.m. China time. So tomorrow is when like that's going to be our last cutoff for standard Unixpress or private line shipments. Okay. And we strongly suggest that this is when you pause D2C US fulfillment from China, because after this, it will be the various DDP options that we just talked about has risk. And look, we talked a lot about the potential compliance risk, right? Where like right now, I believe that there is no like obvious compliance risk for the brand owner. However, that might change like any day, okay? And you don't want to be caught in that until it's more stable. But there is a significant operational risk, okay? So because look, a few days ago, April 19th, DHL suspended B2C services for shipments over $800 to the US. Around the world, by the way. This is not just China. Okay? Um, and the reason why they did that is because there was just like increasing work that would needed to be done to actually clear these customs. And then actually T11, for example, if a courier is using T11, and as a reminder, that is part of what the UniExpress DDP option is going to be using, there's a lot of manual paperwork. Like T11 as a customs process is very, very manual. Like there literally is paperwork that needs to be done. And even if like someone like UniExpress has all the resources to navigate it, the blockade is likely going to be on the U.S. customs side. So like there's literally not enough U.S. customs resources to process T11 or something similar efficiently. So we have no idea. What if, especially, everyone's gonna be using some kind of method that's gonna be similar to that? What happens if your packages get stuck for a week, for a month, potentially? No idea, right? And one risky thing is that even if de minimis gets eliminated, de minimis elimination gets paused at around or after May 2nd, all of those packages that you already sent via the DDP line, we do not expect to be able to get those back. So they might just get stuck, and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, and obviously you're paying higher fees as well, but potentially after May 2nd, everything goes back to normal for a while. And everyone keeps on asking me, like, do I think that de minimis elimination is going to be paused again? Maybe. If you were to ask me, probably, honestly, just because U.S. Customs is not ready. It's far from ready. And I would have probably been like more like 80-90% confident on that, except for the fact that now there's these crazy 145% duties on top of everything. And that really makes it tricky, right? Because Trump seems to be sticking to his guns on the tariffs. And even if he quietly pauses de minimis elimination, it just creates a very odd situation where everyone else is paying high tariffs, but somehow, supposedly, these Chinese companies that he's targeting, like Temu and Shein, are still going to be able to completely skip those tariffs. You can never expect what Trump is going to do, especially when there's going to be like massive pressure like at customs. However, it just seems like I'm not very confident. Let's put it that way, that de minimis is going to be paused with these high tariffs still staying in place. I think it's going to be a very weird time, okay? But I don't know what's going to happen right now, but I think for now, the entire industry needs to assume that de minimis elimination is going to happen on May 2nd. Okay, and and so so in terms of like what like we do suggest pausing between now or tomorrow through May 5th or May 6th, depending on your time zone. Unfortunately, there is one other hiccup in all this is the Chinese holidays from May 5th to like May 4th or 5th, uh, depending on where you are. And whatever Trump does in terms of pausing or changing his de minimis policy, from history, he's not going to do it anytime like before the fact. Like if he does make any change, it's going to be May 2nd or like May 3rd or May 1st or something. Um, and unfortunately, that's still when China is on holidays, including all supply chain logistics providers that actually matter in this case. So my suggestion is that you pause for now, starting tomorrow, and then wait to see what actually happens through the May holidays. And there is, I think one of two like possibilities. One is that de minimis gets paused again, and then everything just goes back to normal, and everyone's happy. Okay, there's the other possibility that okay, the tariffs stay, de minimis is eliminated. However, we have enough data from the DDP lines that have operated through this time that they're actually working, that they're actually efficient, that there doesn't seem to be any compliance risk, there doesn't seem to be any active customs legal codes updating to address these potential loopholes. And then we might just feel more confident that, hey, look, even though the DP line is more expensive, but depending on your brand and your margins, maybe it's still fine, right? And as a reminder to everyone out there who are like operating US based brands or selling to the US, is there's going to be tariffs on everything. And competition is all relative. Everyone is going to be paying higher tariffs. So, most of our clients actually, like, they're fine with paying tariffs or paying higher prices in order to still access the U.S. Okay, so that's another very strong possibility that after May 6th, everything becomes stable, just more expensive, and you can still make it work because everything is going to be more expensive. One thing that's happening right now is that like literally U.S. customers are expecting things to be more expensive. Retailers are like their shelves are gonna go empty, like in the next couple of months, because so much production, so much freight has been paused. Like we're talking about stuff like Walmart. Like Walmart is literally cautioning that its shelves will be empty by the summer. Okay, so like customers all get it, which means that and a lot of our clients have already, and actually not just of our clients, a lot of brands out there, they're very clearly saying that we do need to increase prices or charge some kind of tariff surcharge, for your packages, and it does seem like that's generally accepted by customers at this point. All right, so Judith, very, very important question. Would I recommend to pause any other countries other than the U.S.? So just the U.S. Just to be very, very 100% clear on this, all this really affects the U.S. And actually, that's one of my probably strongest recommendations. If you are not selling to non-U.S., like if you're only focused on the U.S., probably the best way you can do to de-risk from this, from these tariffs, assuming that you have products made in China and shipped from China anyways, non-U.S. markets. Expand to non-U.S. markets if you can, scale up in them if you can, and everything is literally totally fine. actually. Like everything is exactly the same. Everything is just as efficient as usual. And just generally speaking, like just in terms of just global trade, other countries, the EU, the UK, other countries are actually starting to lean more into relationships with China. So not just for DTC shipping, but just generally speaking, increasing relationships with China in general, and just probably the cut. Well, look, I was just in Europe, you know, like in the last month or so, and like honestly, like being American in Europe is kind of weird. Like countries around the world, customers around the world are starting to boycott like American products, anyways, right? So, relatively speaking, like Chinese products are kind of actually gaining more steam and acceptance in these countries as well. So, relatively speaking, you might have more opportunities to access and expand into more global markets. Um, yes. All right. Yes. So, anyone? Yeah. Oh, so Martinez had a very good question. Do we know about how do I feel, or do I know about any of the DDP options to the U.S. from other countries? Okay, so this is a tricky one. So in terms of de minimis elimination, right now de minimis elimination is only targeting China. So the de minimis exemption still applies for other countries like Mexico, like Canada, etc. Okay, so technically, um, like technically, if you can actually ship, I mean, I wouldn't ship to the U.S. from EU, but like if you can ship from Canada or Mexico, it could continue to be efficient with a very strong caveat on compliance, and no one's totally clear on this. Is these tariffs right now, they're specifically targeting Chinese made products, okay? Which means that technically you cannot dodge the tariffs. If you bring your products on a container to Mexico, for example, take advantage of the de minimis exemption, like that's non-compliant, technically speaking, okay? Um, the, yeah. Well, okay. Well, actually, you know what, Martinez, I didn't actually exactly realize that nuance. So Martinez brought up that de minimis is based on country of origin, as all tariffs. So my point was the tariffs was 100% definitely based on country of origin. De minimis, what Martinez is telling me is that de minimis is also based on country of origin. Um, so that's actually, I didn't actually realize that specific nuance, although I know for a fact that at least there's a plan to take advantage of that, because the problem with de minimis, or technically, I guess, a benefit of de minimis if you're shipping from Mexico or Canada, is that the nature of de minimis exemption is that if you declare it under the value, it fast tracks through customs. So they're not even supposed to actually scrutinize your parcel, which means that even if legally you're not supposed to dodge a de minimis elimination by going through Mexico, technically and formally speaking, I don't think that there's actually a mechanism for them to check. I mean, as of now, but they might do that. And this is where like being compliant now versus, or actually, this is in this case, like actually routing your made in China goods through a third country into the U.S., even taking advantage of the de minimis exemption, is not legitimate, is not compliant. But that there definitely exists like an actual, I would say, gray area loophole there. But I wouldn't take advantage of it, particularly if that's going to mean maybe significant investments in your supply chain. Like yeah, like if you do need to make effort or cost to get your goods in Mexico in the first place, but then like hoping to take advantage of their de minimis exemption, but then the like there's further restrictions or further scrutiny on those packages, then you're probably stuck. Actually, kind of a related question that I've been hearing a lot about. It's like, why don't we move? Why don't I suggest moving production to like somewhere like Vietnam? So two main reasons. So first of all, Vietnam, at least in that first round of retaliatory tariffs, supposedly, Vietnam's Vietnam's reciprocal tariffs were at 46%. versus 34% on China. So like even higher than China. Now, that's not including all the other duties from China. But the point is that like the reciprocal tariffs were also very high on Vietnam or like Bangladesh or like, all these countries that have a significant trade deficit with the US and therefore high tariffs. So, and by the way, like those tariffs are paused. But they're like, I don't know what paused means. No one knows what paused means. So who knows when they're gonna come back and how much. And there's been multiple times where Vietnamese government has actually tried to negotiate with the U.S. and just hit a brick wall. Like nothing actually tangible has come out of those, which means that a country like Vietnam, which does actually produce a lot of products for, well, here, like I mean, a lot of Nike shoes, right? So like yeah, like, well, why does Vietnam have a high trade deficit? It's because Americans can afford Nike shoes. Vietnamese cannot afford American-made Teslas. Okay, uh, and so practically speaking, like there's unknown tariffs on like Vietnam or Bangladesh or all these Southeast Asia countries that you might want to shift your production to. So that is a huge risk and there's huge uncertainty where that's going to end up. But on top of that is if you're actually depending on small parcel shipping is there's just no solutions, there's no efficient solutions for D2C fulfillment from Vietnam or any of these countries. That is a very very Chinese thing actually, and it's like built upon years and years of like couriers like Unixpress and 4PX building up their infrastructure to offer efficient D2C fulfillment. And that just simply does not exist in a country like Vietnam. Now, obviously, if you are actually mass scale producing and you can fill up entire shipping containers, that remains to be relatively efficient from Vietnam as well. Although, just given the uncertainty around global tariffs, I wouldn't suggest that that is going to be a long term option for you to consider in terms of efficiency over production in China. And if you don't have like production in Vietnam, or a perfect factory that produces exactly what you need, ramping up production is going to take years. And by that time, who knows? Maybe Trump is going to be, out of power already after the next, 3.5 years or 3 years and I guess like 8 months or so. Still going to be quite a while. All right, so let me see. So, yeah. So Lois, a question. Will we for sure resume automatically U.S. fulfillment on the 6th, despite of any updates like price increases or any foreseeable hurdles? I would say no. I would say that. So, yeah, I mean, I I'm not gonna take the holidays off, so I will keep a close eye on things. Our core leadership team is not gonna take the holidays off, so we'll definitely keep an eye on how things play out. May 2nd, May 1st, May 3rd or so, like those days around the de minimis elimination, that is gonna be an incredibly critical period on like what actually happens, and we'll just know more. But the general statement, like the general view is that even if de minimis is eliminated as expected, the moment that we start to feel that the DDP lines are actually efficient and not creating unnecessary risk for our clients, that is going to be when we actually right now, if you want to use the DDP lines and you work with EcommOps, you can use them. You just have to tell your team. Like we're happy to use them as long as you understand these risks. Okay, and after May 5th or May 6th, it's probably going to be similar to that, except we're going to have a much better understanding of those risks involved. And we might tell you, okay, we don't feel it's that risky. So, like, you guys, like, we actually suggest that you use these lines. Or there might be a situation where we're going to tell you, we still feel like it's a risk. Maybe operationally it's working, but we still are wary of some compliance risks that you might have, especially if you're a U.S. entity. Okay? And then that is something that we will let you make that decision because look, it's something that honestly it doesn't bring risk onto us, but as long as you're aware of any risk that you might have, then we'll obviously be happy to support you in using those lines. So from Gerard, if my Unixpress prices already went up by $5, but Unixpress hasn't publicly shared their price increase, It doesn't mean I'm being scammed by my supplier. And by the way, how do I know they're using DDP? Um, so, well, are you being scammed by your supplier? Um, well, that's a okay. Scam is a tricky term when you use or think about pricing things, right? Um, Let me actually, kind of ask you a hypothetical question. Is that okay? Well, if you get a product for like $5 plus, let's say like $10 to ship to customers, and you charge your customers $50, are you scamming the customer? So my point is that like I don't think they're scamming you. It's possible that they're like upcharging you. Either it is because they're upcharging you because look, everyone expects the price is gonna go up, and I will tell you that if you're saying like $5 increase by Unit Express DDP, that is actually what we roughly expect in terms of that price increase. Um, that was last communicated to us from Unixpress. So like, I mean, just like, but it really matters like how heavy your product is. Okay. Right now though, like I don't want to share that detail because like Unixpress, I literally told us that it's not final. So it's like me sharing it right now, it doesn't really matter. So just follow me and kind of see what the situation is going to be tomorrow, like 25th, 26th or so, and then we'll have a lot more details. But yeah, from what you're saying though, if they increase prices by $5, it does sound like that's based on what they expect it to be. Maybe not the final price, but I don't particularly think that you're being scammed, but they're probably just obviously charging. I mean, look, your supplier is trying to make money, right? I mean, everyone has to make money in some margins, right? Um, and then the follow-up question is, by the way, how do I know they're using DDP? Oh, so this is something that I actually forgot to share. Is so from our understanding, is that like Unixpress is essentially just going to swap their standard lines to use this DDP solution, as opposed to just creating a whole new DDP line. So it's something that you guys don't have to know too much, but actually creating new shipping lines creates kind of like a big hassle for like 3PLs like us, because then we have to like figure out like a whole new like logistics system to support it. But what they're telling us is that most likely everything that Unixpress offers to the US at least through this period is essentially going to swap to their DDP model, and they're just going to reprice it differently. So for example, like if you're using like Unixpress's ordinary line, that is just going to like still be the same, except they're going to use a DDP solution. There is still a question though about battery products and cosmetics products. As far as we know right now, Unixpress has not formally launched like the equivalent GDP solution for batteries and especially cosmetics. Now, from our understanding of the customs clearing process is we actually do feel pretty confident that they should come out with a battery line. Because there's nothing too difficult about customs clearings for battery lines versus normal products. We think it's just that that's not just been their priority, but I do expect that pretty soon there's going to be a formal battery line DDP option as well. Cosmetics and liquid products, that's going to be more questionable because those kind of products do actually require a different type of customs declaration that may not be solved for yet. However, Yanwen did, you know, Yanwen is supporting sensitive and liquid products as well, except it's just quite a bit more expensive than what we think is efficient. All right. So a question from Sebastian. Do I see another webinar happening in early May then? Uh, well, so yeah, I will keep doing these as needed. Okay, so yes, probably there's gonna be more webinars in May or whenever. Those who have actually worked with EcommOps or follow me, like back in the COVID days, like I used to do this all the time. I mean, like in the grand scheme of things, if you were actually in e-commerce during COVID, COVID was worse in terms of uncertainty, in terms of delays, in terms of cost increases. So we dealt with this before, and yeah, during that time, like I was actually running weekly webinars that was on Facebook at the time. So if needed, I'll continue to do that during this period. But hopefully something just changes so we don't have to do this all the time. Um, so yeah, so question from Julian: for products with batteries that are blocked, what's the problem? So like I just said, there's no significant problem with battery products. They do require a little bit of a difference in custom processing, but not that much. Well, okay. So one thing on the first mile part is battery products from China. I mean, just this is just regardless of tariffs and de minimis, is that battery products cannot be sent out of mainland China airports. So they have to be sent out of Hong Kong, essentially. So that does actually limit the amount of options for that first leg air portion for making it to the US in the first place. So this is why I suspect that like Union Express hasn't like really prioritized battery products yet, because somewhat it's more limited in flight options. However, just given what we understand about the products and the customs declaration process, I do not believe that battery products will be limited for too long. All right, so Martina, the question, the idea is to amend the agreement, whether it's with the 3PL or the courier, with pinpointing who the IOR will be, um, or that. Okay, so I guess Martinez, you're kind of asking, okay, well, is there some legal way that there can be a contract saying that, like, okay, in this DDP method, that the IOR is going to be like either Unixpress or like either the 3PL? I mean, well, actually, the IOR should never be the 3PL. That doesn't actually make sense at all because, I mean, 3PL is operating fulfillment. So that doesn't necessarily make sense unless I suppose you're maybe working more of a dropshipping model and you're working like in that case, then maybe like a dropshipping supplier it might be like the IRA because they're technically selling that product in the first place. And in terms of like any kind of agreement with Unixpress, to well, I don't think that that's going to be realistic. Having a legal agreement with your courier to, like, I guess resolve you of all compliance risk or like, legally requiring someone like a specific entity to be the IOR, because otherwise, I mean, the like having an agreement to ensure that your brand is not the IOR, I mean, like possibly, but that may not make that much sense. However, one thing that we actually we do very very strongly suggest to our clients is and by the way, we will never provide your business information to Unixpress or whoever, and we specifically avoid I mean, I like between myself, my co-founder PC, like we literally tell our logistics team to do not provide any information on our client business entity details to Unixpress or whoever, right? Because like I don't know, like who knows, right? Like if they find the business information, like what I mean is like the legal like LLC entity, whatever, then what if they then like somehow use that as the IOR, right? So we definitely avoid that, and you definitely want to avoid. You probably want to avoid situations where like you're working with some kind of DDP provider that somehow requires you to give your detailed business information to them, because who knows exactly if they potentially are doing something that actually places you in compliance risk, kind of using your business information. All right, so question from Gerard. DDP surcharge clarification. If Unixpress acts as the IOR and I only have to pay the shipping surcharge, should I care then they use the correct HTS and declared value? Because if they are IOR, legally it's fully on them, theoretically. I ask because my business is a US LLC, and I wonder if that puts me under more scrutiny compared to a company based in Hong Kong, for example, where enforcement and communication is less strict. So, okay, let me answer the first part of the question first. In this model, if Unixpress or whoever they're working with the IOR here, should you care they use the correct HTS code? So that question is important first. Yes, you should use the correct HTS code. Or I mean, like you should provide it for them. If you don't, Unixpress or whoever is going to force they're going to use the right HTS code, um, because I mean, because it does actually have to do with there's increasing scrutiny. There's been there's been increasing scrutiny even before this whole tariff situation. So let me actually go back to the timeline. Um, there's quite a bit of misunderstanding that de minimis elimination or reform is actually a Trump thing. So back in 2024, Biden already announced in September 2024 that there was going to be additional reform on the de minimis exemption. So at that time, it wasn't really about tariffs, but it was more actually about protecting against illegitimate shipments. I mean, this is where they were actually worried about fentanyl. Because actually, there was a situation probably where like bad actors were literally using de minimis exemption to actually ship fentanyl into the US. Okay? So starting in September, there was already scrutiny on making sure that you're utilizing the right HTS code to describe the product. So we at EcommOps have already been doing this. UniExpress has already been doing this. So that's very, very important that you're actually making sure that the HTS code is correct. Otherwise, it may actually get stuck at customs. Like they're going to question it like outside of the declared value in itself. Okay? And then the declared value part in this DDP method is technically it doesn't I mean, oh, so this is actually where UniExpress actually started asking us as a 3PL to start preparing invoices or factory COGS. So whatever you actually have to validate your claim to the factory COGS. Now, we don't think that they're like formally using it yet. But if you consider this method, like let's say using T11 or whatever, right? If there is actually scrutiny on that shipment, then UniExpress is able to provide to them the right HTS code and also tangible proof that whatever they're declaring is going to be validated by the factory COGS themselves. Okay, so again, like our understanding is that they're not trying to declare like everything to be like 20 cents, right? What they're trying to do is that like as opposed to having to declare something like $20-$30, they want to be able to declare $2 or $4, whatever, and they want to back it up with the HTS code and also actual tangible proof, like a factory invoice of the declared value that they are actually declaring. So this is part of the reason why like I actually feel pretty good about what they're doing. Now, they are taking advantage of some loopholes here. However, it does actually seem like they want to make sure that the HTS code is correct and that they are actually declaring based on a reasonable data point from factory COGS. All right. And then the second part of your question is, your business is a U.S. LLC. Does that put me under more scrutiny compared to, let's say, a company based in Hong Kong? Yes, it does. That is the reality. However, I mean, without going into details of your business, you probably need to have a U.S. LLC to operate anyways, right? Now, business structure, creative business entities designs, that has always been historically one of the most commonly used methods for optimizing things like taxes, right? And look, these are strategies that huge companies use. I mean, like, why does every big tech company have like an office in like Dublin, for example, right? Because of taxes. So like even like Google does that. So yes, if there are ways that you can maybe have some tax efficiencies, and also maybe reduce compliance risk by some creative business structure design, then yes, like I think you should consider that, especially if you're at that kind of scale, right? And yes, the more that you can reduce your physical presence or legal presence in the U.S., the probably the better in this specific situation in terms of your own risk. Martinez asked, does UniExpress use brand names when declaring goods for the GDP process? How can we be sure that they're not using brand names? Uh, so, well, now I don't exactly I can't speak for other China 3PLs, but at least for EcommOps, they just won't know. I mean, I guess technically they can open up a package and check for the brand name, but they're just they're moving so much volume, and honestly, like within ecom, it's such a common thing that your brand name has nothing to do with the product like package anyways, that I don't really think that like I I can't guarantee you that UniExpress is not somehow going to be using the brand name when declaring goods, but it doesn't really make sense because just having some kind of brand name that they can see on a package, like that's not even enough legal information to actually act as an IOR. And we don't provide that information to UniExpress as well, like the actual details of the business name or the brand name. So, follow-up question from Martinez. Would I suggest avoid using branded packaging, poly mailers? So that is actually that is a good question. um, so you know, normally I'm always I'm always for stuff like branded packaging. Like I mean, what Martinez is asking for, like a polymail or a package that like has your brand name on the outside, right? Obviously, a better unboxing experience. Um, yeah, I mean, I I just don't think it really matters if you're using branded packaging or not. But yes, if you want to be just completely safe and like if you want to like reduce your potential compliance risk as much as possible, then yeah, like figuring out ways to remove obvious signs of your brand, at least on the mailer itself, could be a way to reduce risk. I don't know about how much. I don't know how much it really matters, but my point though is that like typically like UniExpress never opens your package unless there's like actually some kind of significant concern around like hey like are you misdeclaring something like or there's actually some concern about the package itself that it's something that you're not supposed to be sending on that specific line, that you're not actually complying with UniExpress's regulations. But we like I cannot guarantee you that they do not actually open packages that we pack at scale and then we do not send that information to UniExpress either in terms of who your business is or who your brand is. All right, so we do have just 2, 3 more minutes, and then I do have to head out. So just if anyone has any just last minute questions that you want to ask, I'll be sure to address it. Oh, and then so Julian had a question about what about the Yang Wen line? I'm assuming you're asking about, well, so for all we know about the Yang Wen line is that their solution is pretty similar to UniExpress, but just more expensive. Um, and they do, for now, we understand that they will accept battery products and they will accept cosmetics products. It's something that, look, if you're an e-commerce client and you have a battery product or a cosmetic product, and then you know for a fact that at this point UniExpress doesn't support that product and you want to use a Yanwen line, we can support that. I still don't recommend it for the exact same reasons that I don't recommend using any DDP solution from now until May 6th until we become more clear. But yes, Yanwen technically it is going to be, it is supposed to support branded, it is supposed to support battery and cosmetic lines. And everything I just also said about DDP in general, the risks involved, applies to Yanwen as well. All right. Yes. So yeah. So anyways, last question from Julian. Okay, for now, it's best to wait a few days. Yes, wait a few days. Wait for 5 days. I mean, technically, from the 25th to May 6th, it's gonna be roughly 10 days or so. But I do remind everyone here that, especially if you've been in this game for a couple years now, that's about the same amount of time that you don't ship for Chinese New Year's. Okay, it's pretty similar to that period, except the difference is that like most Americans, they don't really know about the Chinese New Year's disruptions, and you don't really want to manage, like you don't want to tell them that they're not getting their packages on time because of Chinese New Year's. However, in this situation, it's like everyone knows, like, hey, there's this big tariff issue, and already we see a lot of brands, not just e-commerce clients, actually messaging that there is going to be delays in shipping, that there is going to be a pause in shipping until maybe after May 2nd, until the situation is more clear. So there's manage your customer expectations. If you're going to pause, and I personally think that's a responsible thing to do as well. And we'll be sure to let you know more as soon as we know, and hopefully, like, way before May 6th. All right, well, thank you guys. Follow me on Twitter. We don't have a next webinar scheduled yet. However, if the situation continues to evolve, then I will certainly plan for another one as well. And EcommOps clients, please continue to communicate with your client team, and we'll be here to support you as much as we can. And I'll do my best to digest all the information out there and provide with what I believe at least is the best advice, for everyone out there. And as a reminder, we're all on the same side here. We're all the same team. We are Western companies. We are Western brands selling good products to Western customers. And we have a goal to do things the right way, to utilize China fulfillment in the right way, stay compliant, reduce risk to yourselves, and just kind of do the right thing when we already know that there's a lot of the competition that are not. And that there's no reason to bring on undue legal risks on yourself or your business to, save some money. But anyways, thank you guys for listening. And again, this is Dayu. See you guys next time.